Hi there, and welcome to the Cotswold Explorer. I'm Robin Shuckburgh, and we're exploring the wonderful region of the Cotswolds in southwest England. We've decided to revisit the centre of the region and find some hidden gems, places that are not quite so famous, but still just as beautiful. On this freezing morning, right at the beginning of 2025, we're in Bourton on the Hill. Now, Bourton on the Water, many of you will have heard of. Bourton on the Hill, less so, but it is absolutely beautiful. It has one small drawback, which is that the main road that runs through it makes it feel a little restless. But we're going to show you around. Come with me. Somehow, during the great efforts we've made over the last few years to visit every village of interest in the north of the Cotswolds, in other words, north of the A40, and despite the fact that we had thought we'd made films about every one, somehow we missed Bourton on the Hill. It's within sight of Moreton and Marsh and encircled by Blockley, Snow's Hill and several other amazing places, but we seem simply to have driven through it without stopping. And that is really the only downside to this lovely village. The A44, from Chipping Norton to the east to Evesham in the west, runs straight through the heart of Bourton on the Hill. Trundling lorries and hundreds of cars roar past the beautiful 17th century cottages that line the steep high street from the top of the hill to the bottom. The pavements are narrow, and for the cottages on the south side, often sunk below road level, the traffic wheels are apparently at eye level while the locals sit in their ancient Cotswold sitting rooms. At one point, no doubt many decades if not centuries ago, one of the cottages extended its grounds over the pavement with a wall and entrance, forcing today's pedestrians to step into the amazingly busy road for 5 yards or so. If ever I saw a village that deserves a bypass, this is it. But then, perhaps, the locals don't want one. If we miss this lovely place, then surely almost everyone else will too, and that does have certain advantages. So, the High Street is largely made up of 17th century cottages, which would grace the streets of any village in the Cotswolds. At the top of the hill is an 18th century pub called the Horse and Groom, appropriately named, as the downs on the hills above the village have long since been the domain of training stables and gallops. We haven't visited the pub, but reports are very good, and it does have its own car park. Opposite the pub is the first of two big houses in the village, Manor Farmhouse. Looking out over the road and with clearly spectacular views of the countryside to the south and west, it appears to be a lovely place to live. Halfway down the street is a set of almshouses, which are dated 1831 and inscribed on the front with the legend, "The Retreat for the Aged." These were built by a rector of the village called Dr. S.W. Warnford. We'll be speaking more about him in a moment, as he is buried in the churchyard and was an extremely influential figure in the embryonic 19th century efforts to treat people with mental health disorders. At the bottom of the hill is the beautiful Bourton House, probably originally a 17th century house, but rebuilt and extended in the early 1700s. It's a splendid estate with outbuildings of spectacular beauty, including a brewhouse, stables and a huge barn dating from much earlier. It has 1570 etched on the stone. It still contains its original 16th century timbers, and we can safely say its appearance has barely changed for 800 years. Such riches in such a short street. And then, of course, there's the church. Towards the top of the hill there's a lane to the south which takes a kind of U-shaped turn around the middle of the village, coming out again further down the high street. If you can find a place to park, and you may well not be able to, then on the lower stretch of the U there is a wicket gate at the bottom of some steps which will lead you up to the little church of St. Lawrence. If you look carefully at the top of the steps, you'll see a sign, obviously specially made, which looks like one of those signs warning you not to climb an electricity pole. It's designed to stop you encroaching on what appears to be just a bit of rough, unkempt ground, and it says, "Caution, bees at work." I love that sign, and it started my strong impression that the residents of this village have their hearts in the right place. The impression was magnified by the realization that the church had built a small extension to house a lovely modern loo, left open for passing pilgrims to use at their leisure. But I've decided not to mention that, as the Cotswold explorer has long held the view that telling people where they can eat, sleep or have a pee isn't in their remit. The church, originally late Norman, has, along with almost every church in the region, been substantially altered and added to. Wandering around, you will notice that much of the architectural structure has been chopped about. There's little unusual about this, but this church does seem to me to please the eye even more than many others. In 1826, galleries were installed by the builder Richard Hulls, who came from Chipping Campden, on behalf of the philanthropist Dr. Warnford we mentioned earlier. One gallery section still exists. Warnford was a huge benefactor to the tune of £70,000, a vast amount in the early 19th century, towards the building of what is still the world-famous mental hospital in Oxford, named after him. Whilst his motives and language in the description of the hospital were of their time, he was extremely influential in starting the process of understanding mental health. Of course, we have come a long way since then. He was rector here from 1810, where he lived frugally and gave a large part of his considerable fortune to charitable causes, including a school and almshouses in this village, as well as improvement to the church. In 1889, the chancel was restored and a new pulpit was provided by the prominent arts and crafts architect Edward, known as Guy Dauber, who ran his practice here for a while at the very beginning of the 1890s. There's a very interesting stone screen at the eastern end of the south aisle, made from 14th century fragments, brought, it seems, from Moreton in Marsh. The railed tomb in the churchyard is the final resting place of the rector Warnford, who died while still rector here in 1855. I do hope you've enjoyed our little spin around Bourton on the Hill. We've had a really nice time here. There's this clear feeling of welcome. The notes in the church are all very friendly. It's all extremely good news. In the dim distance, you can see Moreton in Marsh. So we're right in the centre of the great North Cotswolds. It's been a lovely day, freezing cold, but I hope you've enjoyed yourselves. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. You can find our website, thecotswoldexplorer.co.uk. Quite importantly, it's now developing into a proper dictionary of all the things we've done over the last few years. So please do visit, and we will see you again very soon, somewhere else in the Cotswolds.